Hi, so I'm Michelle, and so today I'll be sharing more about like HSC and what being an art student is like. A little backstory on why I decided to like be an art student and take up my scholarship. So, for me, right, the first thing would be like passion. So since young, I've always found myself more intrigued by the study of like different humanities. So like when I was young, I like to learn about different historical events like the Holocaust or like the Japanese occupation and stuff, even though it sounds a bit morbid. Yeah, and so like and I also really enjoyed reading, and I always naturally kind of did better for like the language subject. So yeah, it's kind of like a natural alignment with the art. Yeah. And I also often find myself quite intrigued by discussion of like social issues or like dialogues about different controversies. So I personally felt that an arts education would invigorate me the most. Yeah. So the second reason would be practicality, because I mean, of course, it's also important to think about your future and stuff when you're thinking about what you're going to do in JC. So for me, like I mentioned just now, I was naturally more inclined to the humans. So even with like a much more like significant proportion of time spent revising my sciences in secondary school, right? Um, doing like excelling at humans was something that was more natural to me. Yeah, and even though pursuing humans in JC might sound a bit risky, and it's like a path that is kind of less pursued, because to be very honest, choosing humans in JC closes off quite a few doors for you career wise. Yeah. But I decided that I'd rather be like good at something that was more niche than to be like bad or average at something that everyone else was doing. And since I really like set my mind on taking like the art stream, then I just wondered to myself, like, why not just gun for the scholarship and just go for it, and you never know what comes out of it. Yeah, and honestly speaking, like the scholarship is also like somewhat of a prestigious extension to your portfolio. So like I'm not gonna deny that that was also another like contributing factor to why I decided to like go for it. Besides like the passion part, some of the requirements for you to take the scholarship is, so for the explicit academic grade, right? You should like get at least a B3 in English for your O level or equivalent. And so like the other general ones are just like consistently good results throughout secondary school, good CCA records, and conduct grades. Yeah, so that's quite basic. So for the application process, right, I don't recall receiving an email from my secondary school, but I heard of it from my secondary school like history teacher. So for IP students, right, towards the end of Sec 4, like after your finals, you can apply for it. And like I think for the students that take O level, the application round is like the application starts in like your J1 year at the start of it. So for Sec 4 IP students, you have to take note that you'll have to submit like your applications a bit earlier. So for the preliminary round, right, we had to write an essay. I cannot really remember the word count, but I think it's 1,000 words. Yeah. So they gave us like three prompts, and I chose to write about like a controversial current affair, which at that time I chose to write about the Hong Kong protest. Yeah, and some other questions might revolve around like the environment, or yeah, like humanities related topics. Yeah, and then for the second round, right, we had a group interview at MOE, like headquarters. So um the group usually ranges from about like 3 to 5 candidates, and there will be about like three interviewers or so for the entire process. Yeah, so for the interview, we were asked questions about like ourselves, our country, and like the world. So actually, the questions kind of vary, because some of my friends got asked like more personal questions about like why do they want to pursue humans. But for my interview group, we got a variety of questions. Yeah. And so like examples of like the questions I got asked. So it's like the first one was like, if a secondary school student were to ask you why you should take the humanities, what would you say to them? And then there's also, if you could talk to the 4G leadership about one pressing social issue in Singapore, what would you choose to talk about? And then after that, for the world, they like the broad question about the world, they asked what is one piece of news in the world lately that Singaporeans should pay attention to? Yeah, so those are the kind of questions that I got. And I think one takeaway for me, right, is that you really have to be calm and composed, because actually, like, I went into the interview a bit nervous also, because when I met the candidates that were going in with me, right, they were really, really well prepared and well spoken. And for me, I wouldn't really say I was super, super well prepared, but I think one thing that is very important to demonstrate during the interview is like to show that no matter how much they are going to like uh pinpoint on your answer, like you have to always uh remain like calm and remain like don't just give up like after they like attack one point in your answer, but you have to like continue going, because actually my answers got struck down like quite a few times, or they post like a bit of like criticism to my answers, but like you just have to keep persevering. And it's also good to like uh expand on or like bring in the opinions of your other like good candidates. Like, I mean, you can maybe like raise a question about their answer, or you can like present an opposite like perspective to their answer, and that will really show that like you're engaged in a conversation and that like your mind is like sharp. Yeah. And I think like for the humanities scholarship, but what they're really looking for is like whether you're perceptive or not, or like whether you can see different sides of like one situation. For me, right, like Workload as a humanities scholar. So in UNOYA, which is my JC, we have this thing called EHP. So it's like UNOYA Humanities Program. And the program is like not just exclusive to scholars. Like, so most of actually those people that tried but did not get the scholarship, they can still like join, even cause like if they are passionate about humanities, they can still join. Yeah, so for weekly, so we tend to have weekly EHP sessions. So yeah, they are called like HSP hours. So it's 1.5 hours reserved every Friday. Yeah, so in J1 we had liberal arts modules. So in J1 we covered modules like philosophy. And then in J2 we also have like a fair share of liberal arts modules. So this year we covered like discourse, and then we also had dialogues from professionals in the arts scene. Yeah, and as like a HSP scholar, or as a person that is part of the EHP in UNOYA, we have to do this thing called LAM module. So it's like latitude, and there's altitude and magnitude. So it's kind of like it's just like modules about like humanities and stuff. So for me, I did a latitude module called Global Citizenship and Advocacy. So I learned about like various situations around the world where like that call for advocacy. So like refugee issues and stuff like that. Yeah. And for EHP scholars, we also have to do this project called the capstone project in our final year, so in J2. So from my group, like you get to choose who you want to work with. And for me and my friends, we decided to do a comparative study between American and Singaporean rap. Yeah. And lastly, right, you see like at the bottom, it says like EHP experiential learning program. So usually it's like an overseas trip. So actually what your scholarship does is that it kind of covers like a trip overseas. So our seniors got to go to like Korea and China, I think, if I'm not wrong. But then because of COVID, we didn't get to do that. So our school replaced it with like local like trip, and we got to do like many stuff, like a lot of stuff. So we got to work with like URA to like learn more about urban planning. We also got to hear from an ambassador at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah, so this is an example of what we do in the institute. So like this is an example of my page. Like we are required to do a Google site, because this year we had last year there was COVID, so we couldn't really meet in real life to have like seminars. So we had to do a lot of our work online. So each week they'll give us like topics to do and like readings or like videos to watch, like TED Talks and stuff like that. So then we write our opinions down on our Google site after that. Yeah, so these are like pictures of me and my friends, like all the experiences that we had. So like this is pictures from our field trip during the experiential learning program, and also like a picture with the bottom left is like a picture with our capstone supervisor. Yeah. I'm going to be talking about like the pros and cons of the scholarship now. So firstly, right, for me, like okay, besides like the tangible pros and cons, like example, when you get the scholarship, you get like 1,000 per annum and like yeah, and you get the overseas trip for free, right? Like sponsored. But I'm going to talk about like the more intangible pros and cons now. So one of the pros that I really like feel strongly like this scholarship gives you is that you are surrounded by a community of like-minded people. So when like in a sense, right, like all my classmates and stuff, like everyone is really driven and passionate about the humanities. And it's not just so much in like the academic sense where everyone is like hardcore muggers, but it's also like things like real life social issues. So like because being a human student gives you like an awareness and sensitivity to the world around you. So you can be kind of sure that your classmates will always be on the same page as you. I mean, like they will always know about like world issues. And like I find it super, super intellectually stimulating. And you actually get to learn a lot because you're surrounded by so many like people that are so knowledgeable about so many different issues. And like I just find it super rewarding because I just remember random instances in class where my class will just start having like not really debates but like discussions on our views on different social issues, or like we can also talk about really deep and meaningful things. So that is something that I really cherish. Yeah, and secondly, I think like another pro of the scholarship is that there are many opportunities for extended and hands-on learning. So example, like when I mentioned, the experiential learning program we had last year, it really helps you to like connect the dots from like your textbook to the world around you. So like you really begin to see that like actually humanity is really like all around you and it's not just limited to like the past or like whatever's in your textbook. Yeah, and also like okay, to be very frank, in EJC, right, we kind of get preferential treatment. Okay, I don't know if this is gonna come off as bad because honestly, all the like teachers in EJ are like good, but the thing is that in EJ they tend to give the scholar classes like the best teachers. So for like the BSc scholar class and the HSC scholar class, they generally give like HODs or subject heads across the board. So like I would say if you are going for like humanities, right, you should just try for the scholarship because even if you fail, like even if you don't get the scholarship, you'll still be placed in a class like the HSC class most likely, and you'll get really good teachers. So if you're going to go for art stream, why not just go for like the best teachers? Yeah, and like, but like I think like one of the cons of this scholarship is that you might feel a bit like stifled at times or a bit inferior. Like you may feel a bit scared to speak up because you may feel that, oh, like what if my opinion is wrong? What if they look down on me? But actually, like I would say, just don't worry too much about it and just go for it. Because like at the end of the day, it's all like your individual learning journey. What type of student I think will be a good fit for the scholarship? So I think first of all, it's very important to have a positive learning attitude. So you really have to be like open-minded to like the experiences and what they have to offer. And actually, like even though some experiences may seem very like dreadful, there's actually something to be gleaned from every opportunity. And the thing is that like the amount of stuff that you take out of it and what you learn ultimately depends on how much willingness you have to be present and how much you want to learn. Yeah. And I think it's very important to also have intellectual humility. So you shouldn't just be open to like learning experience, but you should also be open to like the perspective of others because discussion is something that is very essential in like the study of humanities. It's like the hearing of different perspectives. And lastly, I think it's very important for you to have passion because even though the scholarship may be prestigious, right, that is one thing, but passion or like the lack thereof is what determines if you'll keep going or not at the end of the day. Yeah, so I'm not saying that you have to be super sure about what you're doing in the future, but if you are going into art is kind of a commitment because it kind of closes off some doors for you. So if you are going to do it, you should be sure that you have a passion in the field. Thank you.